lesson 1, part 2 complete before second class. You won't be able to hear the video, so I'll narrate it. So basically, this was an experiment. A researcher wanted to know if babies basically made conscious decisions, and did this by seeing which toy they chose. Okay, so I'm gonna fast forward to this video. So there's this red toy here who was trying to go up the hill. And you see there's the baby there. So the red toy was trying to make it up the hill and wasn't able to make it up the hill. And I tried to get up the hill a whole bunch of times. And along comes this blue square toy, and the blue square toy helps the red one circle up the hill. And you see that, yay, the red circle's bouncing. Okay, so then they did it again. Red circle's trying to make it up the hill. Baby watches. Now here's the yellow triangle that pushes the red one down the hill. The one that pushes it down is called the hinderer, or the mean toy. And the blue square is called the helper, or the nice toy. The researchers wanted to know if the babies would prefer the nice toy or not. Okay, so the first part of this worksheet, I just asked you to think about that recording and think about some things that might affect the baby's choice. Okay, so that was questions 1 through 9. So part 2 of that is what we're doing in class, which was, the question was, the researchers had found that 14 out of the 16 infants in the study chose the nice toy. Okay, so the question is, was that just a coincidence? Was that random? Did the baby actually have a preference? Or was it that the babies just randomly chose, 14 out of 16 just randomly chose that the nice toy? Was it a coincidence, or was it a conscious decision? Okay, and for the coincidence, what we're going to do is we're going to think about flipping a coin. And because if the baby chose it just by chance, right, they were given two toys, the nice toy and the mean toy. If the baby just flipped in their heads, a half and half, just randomly picked one, then that would be similar to just flipping a coin and choosing which toy to pick from flipping the coin. So we're going to do a flipping the coin experiment, and you were asked to flip a coin 16 times, with each flip being representing one baby, and recording how many times you get heads. Heads is the nice toy, and tails representing the mean toy. Okay, so those of you who didn't do that video yet, while I'm going to go through the class and ask everybody to report how many heads they got. And while I'm getting reports from everybody else, I will ask you to grab a coin and do that 16 times so that you can catch up. Okay, if you're in the group that hasn't, if you're still working on it and I call your name, just tell me to come back to you, okay? So we're on the worksheet, page 3 of the worksheet, and you see there's a grid for the class distribution of coin flips. While I'm recording this on my iPad, I'm asking you to record this on your worksheet as well, okay? So I'm gonna call on people, and just tell me how many heads you got. Okay, so we're using coins to simulate babies. So that's our distribution of what our class looks like. Okay, looking at the question 10, looking at the dot plot, does it seem that the results obtained by the researchers would have been surprising if in fact the baby had no preference? Does it suggest, or excuse me, what does it suggest about whether the researchers' results provides evidence that the infants do generally prefer the nice toy? This is what the researchers got, right? Oh, goodness, 14 out of 16 of the babies preferred the nice toy. Did any of us get 14? No. Ours are pretty centered around what value?
7 and 8.
7.5.
Yeah, 7 and 8. And are those values of 7 and 8 special? What's this value? What's 8?
Median.
Well, it's half, right? If you're flipping a coin, isn't the probability of getting heads, if it's a fair coin, it's half and half, right? And that's roughly what we got, right? We got really most of our answers are 6, 7, 8, and 9, which is right around half, right? So you wouldn't expect everybody to get exactly half, but no one got 14. No one got 2 even, if we look at the other end of the spectrum. So if it was just random for the babies to choose one toy versus the other, would you expect to see more 14? So think about that and answer that question on your own. Does seeing our dot plot, remember heads were representing the number of babies that chose the nice toy. Is it strange that the researchers got 14 out of 16 babies chose the nice toy if we ourselves didn't see any heads? None of us. Out of the 40 people here, no one got 14 heads by flipping that coin. Does that change your mind for what you think about the babies? Write down your thoughts on that, and I'll give you a moment. And it doesn't have to be anything deep. There's just 40 of us. For researchers, what they do a lot of times is they repeat the same study multiple times so that they can see more of a trend. Because if you do a study one time, those results aren't as meaningful. Because every study, even as we saw, even just flipping the coin, if I had each of you flip a coin 16 times and do this, and then do it another, if we did the same thing tomorrow or the next day or the day after that, if we kept doing that, we would get different results every single time, right? You never see the same results twice. So researchers like to do the same study multiple times for that reason, okay? Because then you see more of a pattern instead of maybe it was just a fluke of the babies that were present, right? Maybe, or even not even just a fluke, flipping the coin. If I had to do all of this all over again, we would get a totally different result. So what we do a lot of times is, if you look on the top of page 4, we've got an applet, is we use a computer simulation. And this is what a lot of researchers do to kind of compare what they saw versus what would happen randomly. So I'm going to take you to a computer simulation. And for the rest of this discussion, we're going to use the same computer simulation that I'm going to show you. Don't worry about going to do it on your own, okay? We'll just all use the same results. So I've got this applet, and you see it's got pennies. So we're using the pennies just like we did as a proxy for the babies. Heads means they chose the nice toy. Tails means they chose the not nice toy. So, but we just care about the heads. We're ignoring the tails. We only care about the heads. So the probability of the heads, it's a fair coin, so that's 1/2. We're going to each do it 16 times. And I'm going to show you what happens if it's 40 of us. There's 40 of us here. So what the computer simulation shows is this. That's interesting. Okay, you see, look at what we got on our paper. It's pretty similar to what we got on our paper, except we didn't get a 12 or a 13. Here they got a 12 or a 13. Okay, so this right here would recommend, it's getting closer anyway to getting what the researchers got. They got a 14, but here we got a 12 and a 13, so we're close. Okay, but again, that's just 40 of us. To have really good data, you want to have more. More is better, because then you can, again, see more of the trend. If I change this to 400, let's see what happens. If there were 400 of us sitting in a room doing this 16 flips, what would that look like? Okay, that looks like here, you see it's pretty centered around that half again, right? That 6 to 10. Most of them are between that 6 to 10. We do see a couple 3s and a couple 13s. Okay, but they're still pretty centered around that halfway point. What if we did 1,000? What would that look like? Okay, so if we did 1,000 times, you see there's maybe 1, 2, only 1, or a handful of 13s. But look at this, 300, and roughly 325 got exactly half, but the vast majority, again, is between 6 and 10. What if we did 4,000? And you can play around with this on your own if you want to as well. When we do 4,000, you see here the scale changed. 600 is now way down. 600 is here. 1,200 is here. All right, so 1,200 of the 4,000, 1,200 got exactly half. But again, we're seeing them way still centered around that 6 and 10. And look at now 14 has changed. It's hard to tell if there were even any 14s. It doesn't look like it. These notches here look like these are just the notches telling us there's 14, 15, and 16. Okay, and if you want to bring this up on your computer yourself, I'll put this in the chat. You might want to bookmark that link in your browser. We're going to be using this a couple more times this semester. Okay, but you see, no matter how many we did, we do see the same pattern. They're centered around 6 to 10. Number 12 asks, how many 14 out of 16s did we get? I don't know. What do you folks think? What do you think? How many 14s are there? I don't know. It's hard to tell. But we did it. This is 4,000 tries. And I don't know, one or maybe a handful, one or two. Okay, very little. With that, then, I'm going to put you into groups. And you could take a picture of this, take a screenshot, or do the simulation yourself on your own computer. Okay, because when you're in your groups, all the screen shares and the chat is just within your group. It's not within the larger class. Okay, and I'd like you to discuss the questions on page 4. Okay, and just so you know, the definition, that p-value that it's talking about, and that null hypothesis it talked about earlier in the worksheet, those are things we're mainly going to be focusing on later in the semester. Because like I said, for right now, I'm just wanting you to kind of see how we use statistics. I'm going to put you in groups, but before I do that, I just want to make sure is everyone clear on the instructions. Discuss the questions on page 4 with your group using the data we just saw. Take a moment when you get into your groups, introduce yourself to the other people in your group, and maybe just to keep it interesting, how did you wind up with the name? Share how you wound up with the name. If you have questions while you're in the chat, there's a way to raise your hand and ask for help. When you're in the breakouts, I will be moving around and going to check in on, hopefully I'll get a chance to go around and check in on everybody. But so just know I will be popping in. Okay, and I will see you all in a moment. Hi folks, how's it going? Okay, is there any part that's unclear or confusing? Okay. Yeah, oh, the fractions. Yeah, that was kind of a, what do you remember about fractions and decimals? Let's back up to 12. What number did you choose for 12? How many results did you say we got for that 14?
We put 2.
2? Oh, that's reasonable. Yeah. So that means based on that graphic, we saw 2 out of the 1,000 people flipping those coins got 14 heads. So 2. So what that would look like, let me share my screen real quick and I can walk you through that. So we've got 2 of the 1,000. As a fraction, remember this of is the fraction bar, so that means 2 over 1,000. And then remember that fraction bar, what that fraction bar stands for is division. So to change that into a decimal, you would do 2 divided by 1,000. So if you put that into your calculator, 2 divided by 1,000, what do you get? You should get 0.002, yeah? And in statistics, this is where we're going to live most of the time, is in the decimals. The statistics this is statistics speak, is how I say it. And then the percentage is what I call the English, right? Statistics, we want to talk in terms of decimals. But when you're talking to somebody, telling them how many of something happened, we always, percentages make more sense in our head. So to get to a percentage, what you have to do is multiply the decimal by 100. Okay, and remember, effectively, what that means we're doing is you're moving the decimal right twice. And it's 2 times because it's once for each 0 here. All right, so the decimal is here and it moves over twice. You can also just put it in your calculator, times 100, but it's good if you remember the shortcut. So this is 0.2%. Does that make sense? That's a process, especially from the decimal to the percentage. That's something we're going to wind up doing a lot in this class. Okay, so it's definitely good to get some practice. And I just realized last night I usually have a problem set that I have you work on, and I did not include that this semester. I'll have to add that in somewhere. But does that make sense? All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to every breakout room. I always try to, but I don't always make it. So I apologize that I wasn't able to get into everybody's breakout room. Give me a thumbs up if you think the baby consciously chose the nice toy. Okay, it looks like the majority of you, but some of you are still not convinced. So here's an interesting thing. So the researchers, it turns out, they were also a little bit unsure. They wanted to provide a little more evidence because, you know, we can never prove anything in statistics. We can only get evidence that suggests something is happening. If babies were randomly choosing the nice toy, you would expect it to be somewhere in the 6 to 10 of them choosing that nice toy if it was just randomly. But what you may have noticed in that video, depending on how closely you looked, you may have noticed the parent was holding the baby, even though the researchers said they had the parents close their eyes. In the videos we watched, the parents' eyes were not closed when the baby was being handed that toy. The parent could have unconsciously been rotating a certain way towards the toy. Also, if you noticed, when the researcher was putting down the toys on the in front of the baby, there were a couple times where the baby's hand was closer to the nice toy. I don't know if you noticed that. If you didn't rewatch the videos, and see if you can tell that. So those are confounding variables. Those are things that could have affected the outcome that the researcher wasn't controlling for. In order to control for the which toy was closer to the baby, ideally the researcher would have been standing directly in front of the baby and then handed it to the baby, right? If you notice, the researcher was on the side of the table and handing it. It could have been that the camera was in the way because the camera was kind of more in front of the baby. So, you know, we don't know enough about that study to know if that camera was there all the time, but definitely from the video we saw, there was one toy a number of times that the nice toy was actually closest to the baby's hand than the other toy. So that could have been it. So in order to handle these confounding variables, they're called, they did the study a second time, and with more babies, different round of babies, and they took the googly eyes off the toys. Remember the round one, the square one, the triangle, they all had googly eyes. They took the googly eyes off and they did it again. Guess how many babies chose the nice toy? It was about 8. So with that, knowing that, the googly eyes actually made a difference. It humanized the toy, right? And that's at least the thinking with the brain researchers. That evidence really then lends itself to the fact that 14 out of the 16 babies choosing the nice toy was actually, it appears that it was actually a conscious decision on the baby's parts, because removing the googly eyes completely changed the results. Eyes matter, right? And if you think about like Hello Kitty has eyes, but have you noticed Hello Kitty has no mouth? I never realized that until someone pointed that out to me, right? You can live without a mouth and you can still see the emotions and of a person if you can't see their mouth. Although there is research to show that you can tell from 100 feet away if somebody is smiling. Anyway, just all these interesting little tidbits. So experimental researchers do a lot of things to try and further make their case. So when you see things, just think about, you should always be thinking about, when you see experiments, what are things that the researchers could not control, and did they control for those? And there's a lot of things us researchers can do to control for that, and random group assignment is one of the largest things experiments do. Is it randomly assigning people to different groups, takes care of a lot of different variables: baby preference, weight, height, color preference, all those kinds of things. Are there any parts of today's assignment or anything we've done this week in the in-class activities or the class in general that anyone had any questions about or that were still unclear? I see somebody says, should we hold on to your classwork? Yes, absolutely. In fact, I suggest you keep them in a 3-ring binder or a folder of some sort, because you're allowed to use all of these notes that you're creating for this class on the tests. Okay, and one thing I suggest you do too is when you're working through this classwork, the pre-class assignments, the in-class assignments. Have one sheet of paper where you're putting little kind of a Cliff Notes cheat sheet to yourself, and that way each lesson has a little, just a couple lines of a Cliff Notes for what that lesson was about and what the kind of important takeaways of that lesson were. And that way, when you're working on a quiz or when you're working on the test, you can go to the Cliff Notes version to try and find what it is you're looking for. So basically the Cliff Notes would be like an index with all the important bits, so you don't have to keep flipping through all of those notes. Especially when it comes to the final exam, you're going to have, 24 lessons worth of material. That's going to be a lot to slog through. Right, this first test is going to cover lessons 1 through 9. So that's going to be a little more manageable, but still, you don't want to spend your 2 hours slogging through the material. You want to spend those 2 hours thinking about the answers, right? You don't want to be on a treasure hunt. And all of the problem sets have 3 attempts on them, to answer Ryan's question. The quizzes and tests only have 1 attempt, but problem sets for the lessons always have 3 attempts. Okay, so and here's, if you haven't noticed, many of the assignments also only have 3 options. So for a lot of these, you have a really good chance of trying to get 100%. That said, please don't just go and choose a different answer. The idea of the homework and giving you multiple tries is for you to understand why it's answer A and not answer B, right? Don't just go for the score, go for the understanding, okay? And that's going to be the huge difference in success for this class. So for your homework tonight, like I said, I will send out a reminder. Do be aware, I try and put links in those announcements for the assignments that you should be working on immediately, and the assignments, kind of the previews for next week. And I'm giving you those previews for next week because in my experience, most of you students tend to do your homework on the weekends. The weekdays tend to be a little more chaotic for you. So I put those in there as links, but I heard a report from some students the links aren't working consistently. Remember, all the assignments are under modules, so you can always get to them that way. So your homework immediately is that orientation module and the lesson 1 module. And then for next week, lessons 2 and 3. Also, always check your answers. Compare your answers to mine. At the very least, even if you feel confident in your answers, always check my answers. The solutions that I put up on Canvas are more than just solutions. I highlight and use colors and add in some explanations. So you might want to take a look at my solutions, if for no other reason, to look at the extra solutions that I give. So for instance, today what we worked on was inferential statistics. And it's called inferential because we're gathering data and we're inferring something about the population. We can never prove anything, we can infer. So that baby study, 14 out of the 16 choosing the nice toy with the googly eyes versus 8 of the 16 choosing the nice toy without the googly eyes, we can infer that babies are making a conscious decision to choose the nice toy, right? And that's why it's called inferential statistics. We're not proving it, we can't prove it, we can never prove it, but there appears to be a link between those two. Okay, and then lurking confounding variables. If you're confused about a topic, I would suggest looking at my solutions. The color coding and the highlighting studies have shown that activity of looking at the colors, actively making the colors, and seeing the colors, and doing all 3 of those simultaneously actually helps your brain file things away. Okay, so you can look at mine, but I highly urge you to do it yourself. A lot of research showing that math and colors help you learn things. My solutions are at the bottom of the page of the lesson, the pre-class assignment. For this lesson, lesson 1, there's one more piece to lesson 1. It's part 3, and the answers for this activity we finished today are on that page, part 3. So that's it, and I will see everybody on Tuesday. Have a fantastic weekend. Again, I'm going to stick around for the next 20 minutes if you have any questions. It was nice to see you all again today. Have a great weekend.